Okay. Okay. Still waiting for some wondering people who are currently wondering about. Jeez. You want to start already? Okay. I guess. Okay, anyway. Okay, welcome everybody to our second session of our Bible study on the Sermon on the Mount. Yes, sorry, here we. Yes, just as before, we will have a quiz. Yes, there are, and there will be. So we have changed based on feedback from the various sessions. We have made the quiz just a little bit longer, so there's a little bit more time for everybody to 较量一下. Unfortunately, I could not. Apparently, I need to upgrade my account or something to make the font bigger.
Give your feedback to Ian, and then he will try the next session next month to do it. Yeah, but for now we just need to.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm still kind of figuring out the whole Kahoot thing, to be honest. Yeah. So yeah, give me a bit of time, maybe a couple of rounds of feedback, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll probably get it or something. Yeah. Also can. No, can suggest. You know? Yeah. Okay, so let me just see this real quick. Okay, anyway, so this is coming off the back of our introduction to the Sermon on the Mount, where we kind of discuss like its context, where it is in the Bible, and why it ended up being written in the first place. Because these things are all pretty important to knowing what's in it. Like in order to understand what's in it, like some of these prerequisites were key to our understanding. So this is where things start. So this is the part that's just before the section on the Sermon on the Mount. So before Jesus, we have John the Baptist, right? So how the book of Matthew narrativizes this is that Jesus' ministry only really starts after John gets in trouble with the authorities. Yeah, so after this happens, Jesus goes to Galilee, and that's where Jesus starts this whole ministry. So baptism happens first, and then that's a good question. Matthew's actually quite interesting in this regard. The book of Matthew has the baptism first, then Jesus goes to be tested in the desert, and in the meantime, there is whether John the Baptist is put in prison while Jesus is in the desert, or whether there's some sort of time skip in between then and then, not super clear, because the book doesn't really dwell on that detail very much. So whatever the case, Jesus' ministry, according to the book of Matthew, only starts after John's been put in jail. Okay. So none of the books actually say exactly how long this takes. Some books go into more detail than others about what happens to John, but there is no real if you want to put it on a strict timeline, not going to work out so well. Yeah. So Jesus' first message is repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. So the word repent is a bit more so the word repent has a bit of baggage nowadays, obviously, because there's a moral element to it, and the wording actually is more like turn around or turn yourself around, do something different. It's more like that. But I guess repent works for our purposes. Now, why am I talking about this now? Because I'm going to dwell a bit more on the meaning of words and the meaning of words and how people used to structure these forms of preaching. Because that's quite important to understanding the first part of the Sermon on the Mount itself, which is... Does anyone know what the first part of the Sermon on the Mount is? The very first section. Yes, hooray, thank you, Jolene. So, that's actually, it is the Beatitudes. That's the first part of the it's the first part of the sermon altogether, and that actually comes from the Latin. It actually does come from the Latin word that is actually beatus, which means to be happy. Actually, it's not. The Latin is a bit more neutral. It goes like to be happy, beatitude. Okay. Anyway, next slide. Thank you. Oh wait, hang on. I should have the clicker. My bad. I should really use the clicker. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so this is okay. So before we even start, y'all can see. Can y'all see it? Is it clear? Okay. Yeah. So before we even start, we need to go over how we perceive these sayings. So what we are actually getting, what we usually read is, blessed are those who such and so, for they will be Y. So it's blessed are the X, for they will be Y, right? Like that's what we actually get. Blessed are the A, because they will be B. So the exact wording being used here is not precisely that. So in the original Hebrew, they actually have two words to this. They actually have two words where they describe the process of being blessed. So the first one is what we call BRK. So does anyone remember what I said before about Semitic languages? So yes, because they actually did not. So what they did not actually have vowels in our traditional way of thinking about vowels. How they put in vowels is they would actually have the consonants. All the things that they write are really just consonants. And based on the kind of dots or squiggles they put on to modify these like words, to modify these consonants, you can insert vowels in the middle. So if you've ever seen like these words, they have like weird dots and squiggles in the middle somewhere. This is how they mark out like what you're actually supposed to say. And based on the different pronunciations, the inflection's not the same. So like for example, the Jews have a saying that goes, that God rules, like God has ruled, God rules, and God will rule, right? But actually technically so it's called Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Imlok. But actually, all these things would be actually written as MLK, basically. Like, Melech, Malach, and Imlok would all be written MLK. They just have a different pronunciation to them. So one's slightly past tense, one's present tense, and one's future tense. So that's how these things would work. Okay, so the word for blessing is actually BRK, which is Barech. And this is actually not a state of being. So Barek actually refers to doing something. It's more like it's an action word. So it's you have, you receive, you offer blessings. And the only entity, at least in the Jewish mindset, the only entity that has BRK as like a state of being is God. Like they don't think that anyone else can have a state of being the blessed one. You get what I mean? Like everybody else is really just sharing or passing the blessing that God has given them around. This is the Jewish mindset. So actually blessed, they'll be like, huh, what? No. People are not blessed. God is blessed and people do or do not have God's blessing. That's how they consider it. Okay, so I'm just telling you this because this is the mindset that Jesus would have walked in with. and this is the mindset that his audience would also have walked in with. So how do you describe somebody who has God's blessing, right? So this is the function of the word ASR, or Ashrei. So ASR is probably best, so ASR is the state of being, okay? So to call somebody ASR is not to pronounce God's blessing upon them or bless them per se. This is what you're trying to say is when you call somebody ASR, you're saying that the person is living in a situation or is living in a way that indicates that they are or will receive God's blessing. So that's why, so you know how Psalms 1 starts? Anyone know what anyone can remember how Psalms 1 begins? So, anyway, don't worry, I'll just go on real quick. So Psalms 1 goes, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in the way of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers," right? "But whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on God's law day and night." So even though our text starts blessed, but the Hebrew word here is actually ashrei. So it's happy. Ashrei actually kind of means like happy or fortunate. So it's happy is the person who does such and such. And then after that, they follow up with because they will be blessed with something. So it's happy is the so-and-so, and then the next half is the blessing. Okay, so in Psalms 1, it would be happy is the person who does not walk in the way of, does not, so-and-so. And then when you reach verse 3, it is, what's the blessing? That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. That's the blessing, right? So this is how we want to read sentences that have been created this way. Okay? Of course, when they say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord," that's actually BRK, because this is their worldview. Yes. Yeah. So, correct. So only God gets to be BRK. Everybody is happy to be blessed. Okay? One is the doing, one is the state. Except for God is the exception to the blessing being a doing thing. Okay. So, yes, like it is in that set. Yeah. So that word is only really reserved for God, which is actually why it's actually quite a big theological step for people to say that as God is holy, be holy. That's actually for their time, it's a big, like nowadays we kind of take that for granted in our Bible, but at that time that's a big theological jump. It's like, what do you mean you can be holy like God is holy? It's a bit of a hop, step, and a jump, really. Okay, so the word that is used in Greek is in turn makarios, and this also means happy, fortunate, and that's where we get beatitude from. And so this word actually maps best. So even though the book of Matthew, like all the other gospels, is given to us in Greek, we can map this word best onto ashrei, or to be happy. Okay, so in truth, most of the Beatitudes start with makarios is the person who is X, because they will be blessed with Y. In fact, in the Orthodox Church, where they still read these things in Greek, these things are not called Beatitudes, because Beatitudes are for the dirty Latins who translated the Greek. What horrible people. So when they read it in the Greek, they don't call this Beatitudes. They call it makarismos, which is the way of the happy. Yeah. Or like in English, I guess we would call it makarism, but in there is makarismos, like the way to be happy. Yeah. Okay. Dong-di-dong. Okay, with that in mind, let's go to Beatitude number 1. Sorry, is it a bit small? Hopefully not. Anyway, so this one goes, so with the context that we now have from just now, it reads like this: happy are the poor in spirit, and what's the blessing? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So when we think about it, so the first word here, okay, we've already explained the happy section, right? So the second section that we want to think about is poor. what are the words that we end up using here? So the word that we use in Greek is phthokos. Yes, the P is not quite P, phthokos. Okay. So this actually refers to people who are. So it is not just like, so it's poverty in a more physical sense. So it's poverty in a more physical sense. So it's those who are in life, they are poor, you have no status, you have no money, you are living a crap life. Okay, hold on. Yeah, nope, this is a good question. So where does the spirit come in here? So spirit, nowadays we call it spirit as in spirituality. So the Greeks understood this word. The word here is pneuma, which to the Greeks actually means a lot of things. Actually, it could refer to their, because at that time they still believed in the 4 elements. So pneuma is actually the wind or the air, but it can also be breath, and so it can be life.
So basically, it means actually are those who are weak. Because you are poor in life means you are very weak.
So, okay, yeah, okay. That's a good thing as well. So this also maps onto something. This maps on directly onto the Hebrew of ruach, which also is both wind and life. The idea is that so in Genesis, when God breathes life into things, God breathes ruach into them. So it's literally wind is associated with life. Nowadays that's not really the word association, but in the past, wind was life. Earth is the material that makes up life. Water sustains life. And fire is power. So they kind of have that association in the past. So nowadays, pneuma is actually translated as spirit or soul in the spirituality sense. But this is not totally inaccurate. I'm pretty sure we understand that sometimes when people associate moral and spiritual goodness with physical goodness, right? We even have a field of it that has most of the religiosity stripped away. We call it psychology. Like the whole basis of psychology is that mental health is related to physical health, right? We have this association that to some extent, what you are in your mind and what you are in your soul maps on to what you are in your body. We have always kind of had this idea. So it's not totally wrong to say. Yes?
If I take the exact understanding of English is poor in spirit would mean that somebody who is lacking in spiritual sense or whatever. Then the understanding of being blessed and you get the kingdom of heaven don't really make sense. But if you say it's poor in life, meaning that you are physically weak, you will attain the kingdom of heaven faster, that one makes sense more.
So, okay. Yeah. Yes. No. So yeah. So this is what it. So what Jesus is trying to say here is that he's speaking to you. Understand? You have to understand that he's speaking to people who believe that these two things are connected. Like even nowadays, when something bad happens to you, right? Sometimes people wonder, what did I do wrong? You can see that there's an instinct there to associate the two things, like your actual wellness in your life and some kind of like spiritual, moral wellness as well. Yes, we associate these two things. And in those days, they were even more closely associated to one another. Let me just give you all an example. Yes? Yes? Nay, unfortunately.
Then it's not correct, because if your poor in spirit means you are far away from God, then you cannot have the kingdom of heaven. So in this verse, right, when he says blessed are the poor in spirit, it actually means the people who are physically weak, meaning that you die very fast, you are blessed because you will go to the kingdom of heaven faster.
It's not just that, I suppose, but yeah.
If you say, oh, because you are spiritually weak, then your blessing, you will get the kingdom of heaven, then it even don't make sense.
Okay.
That you are far away from God, right? Then why would you inherit the kingdom of heaven? As far as I understand, spirit
Yeah, so what I would say is that we have attached a lot of baggage to this word that likely wasn't originally there. And okay, so this goes back. This goes back to what I said in the first session, which is that let us first try to understand these words as people would have understood them then. And then it makes more sense to us now. What that first, then this. So, yeah. And that is what I mean. So we want to understand it as they would have understood it then, because Jesus was speaking to them first, not to you. You know what I mean? The first audience for this would have been the people sitting there on the mountainside with him. In their context, not us yet. We come into the picture a couple thousand years later. So that's fine. Let's just go with how they would have seen it first. Okay. Okay. Okay, anyway. So I'll just give you an example from John 9 to tell you how people would have associated like physical wellness with spirituality. So do you remember, does anyone remember what John 9 is? So John 9 is about Jesus healing a man who was born blind. Jesus goes and heals this man. So he sees this person who was born blind, right? And what do his disciples ask him? The disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? This tells you a lot about what they thought about physical wellness, right? Or he has passed, or some curse has passed on to you from somewhere. What does Jesus say to them? Jesus, in that particular context with the man who was blind, Jesus replies to them, neither this man nor his parents have sinned, but this happens so the works of God might be displayed through him. Right? So Jesus is saying that, what Jesus is trying to say is that this association's not quite correct. Okay? You have to understand that Jesus is coming from, the issue with the Sermon on the Mount, and I will talk about this later as well because it will actually happen again, is that sometimes it feels like Jesus is answering questions that nobody in the book of Matthew has asked him just yet. And he is expressing some opinions that nobody has yet explicitly asked him in the book of Matthew. But he will talk to these people later. So, yes. Not really. So Jesus is trying to say that there is... No. Okay, while that could also be the case, Jesus is actually talking to them. He's saying that I know that people think that, so probably it's worth explaining where Galilee is really, but okay. All right. We need to start from a different place here. Okay, clearly we need to do this other thing first. Okay. Never mind. This is not first in the slides, but probably need to explain this one first. Okay. So you have to understand where Galilee is in the world of its time. So Galilee is, when Jesus in the various gospels, when Jesus goes back into heaven and Jesus says, you will be my witnesses in Judea and Samaria, you have to understand that he's mostly talking to people from Galilee. So for them, Samaria and Judea are actually two places that are definitely not Galilee. They live in a completely different place altogether. And they live at the furthest point away from the center of what would be considered the Jewish world. So in terms of distance, they are the outcasts. They are the people far from the center. Why is that? And they are considered to be far from the center both physically and spiritually, because this place, Galilee, has always been Israel and Judah's like northern border. Like even in the times when Israel and Judah were still states, when they were still like polities, but independent polities by themselves, this place was the closest to foreign countries. And so this is where they have trade, they have commerce, they have cultural exchange, literature comes in. So actually these people aren't dumb. They are certainly not, they are not educated in the formal, recognized Jewish sense, but they're not dumb by any means. Like all this stuff comes into them, they know what's going on, they're not silly. But at the same time, this very cultural exchange, this very interaction with other societies is exactly what causes them to be considered impure. The Galilean accent is actually quite notable. Like, for example, Peter is actually noticed because of his Galilean accent at one point, where after Jesus is arrested, right? People actually notice that he's from Galilee because he talks funny. And they're all just like, hang on a minute, you're from that place, right? You're from that place of the weirdos and people who hang out with pagans. That's what they mean. When they say, you've got a weird accent, they mean you hang out with pagans and you're a weirdo. Okay, something like that. Anyway, so that's what they are trying to say. So these are these people, and actually Galilee is not just home to Jews. Galilee is actually home to a lot of Gentiles who have been displaced due to, we need to go back to some Roman ideas, because the Romans were the dominant power of the day. And one of the things that the Roman government had the right to do was to uproot people of low class and just shift them somewhere where they were needed. So it's like, these are your people, like your freedmen. So freedmen are people who are ex-slaves, but are not yet citizens. So this is your freedmen, your ex-convicts, your ex-soldiers. Okay, specifically not Roman citizen soldiers, but what the Romans at that time would have called auxiliari or hastati, who would be, actually largely these people are foreign auxiliaries who want into citizenship, like they have yet to achieve it, but they serve Rome, right? Yep, foreign workers. Yes, basically, 就是你的外籍劳工. Rome could just take them from where they were positioned. You could be somewhere in like Gallia, which is like France nowadays, and you just go, okay, you're going to Judea next. Just whoop, and you go from France all the way to Judea. That's a long way to be in those days. So these are people who have been uprooted. They have no status. And Jesus is saying, we link back. Now this links back to the morality of the day, right? Which is that if your status sucks, if you're poor, if you're downtrodden, a lot of people think this person must have done something wrong. This person must have sinned, right? So now this makes what Jesus is saying more sense. He's addressing them. He's saying, you are the ones who are considered poor in spirit, right? Because people associate their wellness in status with their wellness in their soul. So Jesus is saying that you are the ones who are regarded as low in status and therefore as low in spirit, right? But he says, but I tell you that you are the happy ones. Remember I said the happiness, ashray, is the state a person is living in where they will be blessed. So Jesus is saying, even though you are regarded as such, let me tell you, you are the ones who will be blessed. And what's the blessing? The blessing is the kingdom of heaven. You will inherit the kingdom. That's the blessing. Okay, and what is the kingdom? So what is the kingdom of heaven? The phrasing used here is in Greek is basileia ton uranon. So basileia is nowadays we know it as basileus, which is kingdom or realm, like something that is ruled by someone. Okay, uranon is an interesting word because uranon comes from the Greek word for the god of the sky, Uranus. So that's where that word is from. The Greeks, so nowadays we call this heaven, right? And we think of that as a completely other place that you go to after we are gone, we be with God in there. This is actually not exactly how the Greeks viewed that. So in Greek, the Greeks actually had a word for what we would consider heaven nowadays. So they had a specific word for that, where good people or righteous people go after they die. The Greek word for that was Elysium. Elysium. And the Romans took that idea as well. The Romans kind of just borrowed that straight up. So they also have that word. So if they were talking about a completely different place altogether, they would probably have used the word Elysium instead. But they use uranon. So uranon is associated with the divine because it is derived from the name of a god, but it is not the afterlife. So Jesus is talking about a place that's here, but that reflects God. That's why this word is, that's probably why this word is used. At least this is how I would read it. That this word is used is the in-between, this word is in between what the Greek and the Jewish world at that time would have seen as heaven and earth. And so this is a space that reflects God, but isn't what the Jews would have called the world to come. Okay, wait, hang on, I'm introducing a new idea here. Anyway, the Jews also believed in an afterlife for the righteous, but the Jews called this the world to come. So the Jewish concept of this is that one day Messiah will come, and Messiah will trigger the renewing of the world. And this renewal of the world is to them known as the world to come. Revelation would have been considered a rather radical reading of... I think they would have recognized it as a reading of what the world to come might look like, but I think they would have regarded it as quite a radical approach. But, I'm just saying that this is the... This is kind of like what Jesus is walking into right now. So Jesus is saying that this Vasileia ton uranon is near. We can create it here on earth. You can create a society. Basically, Jesus is talking about creating a society that reflects God's image better. Okay, good question. So this is a really good question. So the lingua franca at that time, so they actually had a couple of different, nowadays we call it lingua franca, but French has never been the lingua franca, so sorry. Yeah, anyway, so they had more than one. Okay, so at this time, one of the most common spoken languages was Aramaic. And there's two most common spoken languages in the Levant. One is Aramaic, and the other is Greek. So people spoke these languages most commonly in this. So Aramaic is another Semitic language that is actually derived from the speech of so it's more correctly derived from the speech of the Babylonians. So you don't say so fast. It's not completely dead. So there still exists an Aramaic Bible that is read by some churches in the Levant. It is called the Peshitta. So no, it's not quite dead. It's definitely not common, but it's not dead. So Babylonian itself is pretty dead, don't worry. So the Babylonians started off with a script known as Akkadian, and then later they used this thing called the Sumerian script and their own Babylonian script, and this is what eventually gives birth to Aramaic. So we actually don't know what exactly he says we don't know what exactly comes out of his mouth for every single word, but it is quite likely that there is, if you know how Creoles work, like how we speak English with other people, we use mostly English or mostly Chinese, depending on who we're talking to, and there are various loan words that we use from other languages, right? Or other dialects. Like we say, like, don't call pay me leh. It's just like, you are speaking, it's mostly the structure is English, right? But we've borrowed a word in there somewhere from Hokkien, right? Like so. So it is quite likely that it's quite likely that Jesus spoke like some sort of like mixed Creole. It is possible. It also depends on the audience. Okay, so going back to the map of Galilee, so Galilee is actually an interesting place because that's where like a lot of different people, yeah? So it is very possible. So the Sermon on the Mount, yeah, correct. Like the Sermon on the Mount has what we call a likely audience. Yeah, but we don't actually have a determinate audience. We more like have a likely audience. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the thing. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by the audience is not determinate. Yeah. Yes.
But if he was addressing but if he wanted the multitudes to hear, then he will have to speak a language that the multitudes will understand.
I mean, but the disciples they largely spoke that Creole as well. They largely, I mean, they largely spoke Aramaic as their Creole. They would have probably have like loan words from other places, but Aramaic is the most likely language they would have spoken, because that was essentially the language spoken there. Like Aramaic is kind of like spent some time developing into the dominant language following the return from exile. Yeah, I believe so. That's where he gets the some of his. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, yes. Thank you, Hui Hui. No, that's fine. That's fine. I think we some quick and succinct clarity is fine. Yes. So you can how I would end up interpreting the first beatitude would be something like this. So this is kind of they will be. So this is blessed are the people who have no power, they have no status, don't have anything, and that's how people would have also regarded you as morally inferior. Like at least that's kind of the Jewish context we are thinking about here. Powerlessness in life is also reflects morality, ill morality, and Jesus is saying that's not true, because you,
The ostracized or the people who have no status
yeah,
in society.
yes, and Jesus is saying that's not true. You will be the ones who you are the ones who best, like who are closest to the kingdom of heaven, so to speak. Yeah, and a lot of them were the literal poor. Yes. I mean, I would say that Jesus himself would not say that those things are exactly the same. I
And then, so you think that because they really know spirit, then they will have the kingdom of heaven. Okay. So then they will be blessed by God. Okay.
mm,
So they will beg from God. Is that what you're saying? poor in spirit because I don't want God, I don't want to live, I don't want to go near to God. Then
Because
don't, then it a bit don't make
you
sense.
have to know that the audience that Jesus spoken to, they are primarily Jews.
Yeah, which is his disciples actually.
His disciple and the Jews. By nature, they are Jews like his disciple, old poor guy, or fisherman and so on. So these are the one that they know their spiritual heritage because they are Jews again. So they are chosen by God. So, but they also know that not everybody has a spirit because
That's not Holy Spirit hasn't come.
only a few will be blessed.
Just a quick clarification. The concept of the Holy Spirit is a very much a Christian development. Yeah, the concept of that beyond simply the idea that God has spirit and God is spirit is that's definitely so. Anything beyond that is very much a Christian development. The Jews at this time did not really think of it as such.
So that's why when you look at this, when we say,
But there is, speaking of the spirit, but there is one person actually, and we're talking about it. There's a King David. Do not let the spirit of me, right? He said that do not let the spirit leave me. So another, not everybody has the spirit of God.
so I mean, okay lah.
And
I understand what you are saying, but I think there could be slight difference but the meaning is there lah. Slight difference in understanding, but the meaning is very similar to what Ian is trying to talk about here. You can be powerless in the physical, or you can be powerless because in spirit also.
For those who are powerless, you don't have a spirit.
Okay lah. I think it's definitely yes. I got something.
I think in the Bible, poor in spirit means having a humble spiritual attitude and recognizing that God is the source of all good things.
I think this interpretation is actually also like very much a product of like Christian theology. Now you have to understand that at this time, this theology does not yet exist. Like that's what I mean by let's try to put ourselves away from our current like Christian interpretations of how this works and go like how would this have started? Like before any of these ideas were invented, like before we ever like came up with these ideas, before Chrysostom, before Augustine, like before any of these things, like what did we have? What was Jesus trying to build? You know what I mean? You have to understand that these things are all zero at the moment. We need to build it. It is both ambiguous, and we've also that it already had quite a lot of meanings when Jesus was speaking these words. And afterwards, as Christian theology has developed, we have added still more meaning onto it. So by now, these words, right, are so that is part of the issue, definitely. That these words have become so laden with like multiple meanings that we are just like, what are we talking about? That's not just like, yeah. Yeah, that's why in some ways I'm telling you all just push that aside first and start with Jesus had none of these developments to work with. Jesus needs to just think about it. Jesus is trying to I'm glad that we've actually had this conversation because now we get the understanding that actually these words are so laden with meaning now. And what Jesus was trying to do was Jesus was trying to build these ideas up from nothing. Okay, there's nothing here right now. All they have are the Jewish scriptures and the development in Jewish law that has gone on for the last almost 1,000 years or so. That's what they have. They don't have the further 2,000 years of like various developments in thought in both Judaism and Christianity that has gone on since then. Largely, actually, in many ways, in response to one another. So these things don't exist yet. So let's try to imagine a world where they don't exist. Okay? Yeah, this is. I know it's going to be difficult. It was quite difficult for me as well. Trying to imagine a world in which these things don't exist yet. Yeah. But so in conclusion, where we're trying to go with this is that Jesus is speaking to this audience and trying to tell them that, despite what people think about you, despite where you are in life right now, you are actually very close to the kingdom of heaven. And, join up with me and I'll make you the team. We'll make the team. So if you look at the other gospels don't quite have it this bluntly up front like this, like right in the front of the thing. But it also has many sections in which this is who Jesus comes to first. Jesus calls the lowly first. Jesus calls the fisherman, like not only the lowly in terms of, I don't have money. I'm pretty sure Levi, son of Alphaeus, has a whole lot of money, but no status, right? 你是罗马人的走狗. Everybody hates you. That's not status. That's just having money. It's money but no respect. Yeah, you get no respect out there on the streets. That's the situation here. That's who Jesus calls to be his disciples. And I think they understood, they probably understood that in this way. Okay. Whew. That was a bit. Okay, so the second one is happy are those who mourn. So it's like, which is a little weird, right? You're like, happy are you when you are mourning? It's just like, huh? It is somewhat ironic. Yes, no, but this is a good instinct. So mourning as a biblical concept is something where we live in our emotional pain so that we have a greater understanding of ourselves and of the pain of others. Like for example, we look at the part where mourning is actually pretty important in the Bible. You actually have these long periods of mourning and of reflecting on pain. The whole of the book of Job is literally the guy is suffering like hell and he reflects upon life. That the pain causes a great deal of reflection. Of course, a great deal of anger as well, but hey, right? And there's that incident where Jesus mourns his friend Lazarus, right? Could Jesus have just shown up and just raised Lazarus from the dead straight away? Yes, right? We believe that Jesus could have just shown up right there and just gone, okay, Lazarus, come out. No need for all the crying, right? But Jesus takes a hot minute to get over there. And once Jesus is there, Jesus spends some time mourning with the people there as well, right? Because this process, I think to Jesus, this process of understanding pain is important. Without an understanding of pain, in many ways we don't appreciate. Often when we don't, I think we all know the. I think we all have that. We all experienced this before. Without understanding a person's pain, you don't really understand what they go through. You don't really get them. You don't really sympathize with them, right? And our pain helps us sympathize with other people. Yes, and that's kind of what Jesus is talking about here. So happy are those who mourn because they will be comforted. God also grants you comfort.
So is it if you don't mourn, you won't be comforted?
Okay. Okay, so interesting, right? Okay, no, that is an interesting question. So, but if you think about it, it's not that people don't mourn, but often we are able to distract ourselves from pain, right? Like, 就是说不用, if you have resources, if you have money to burn, if you have connections to spend, if you just have other things to distract yourself with, you don't have to live with your pain, right? Or not fully. You don't have to just sit there and suffer, right? There's all sorts of other things you can do. That's kind of why Job's situation is so terrible. There's literally nothing he could have. There's literally nothing to do and nothing to be done. He just has to sit there, right? His family is dead. His possessions are gone. His friends believe that somehow, because something terrible has happened to him, he must have sinned somehow. Nobody is sympathetic to his plight. Like, he calls out to God and God doesn't answer him for like the most part of the whole book. He's just having a bad time, And Jesus, so in some ways, Jesus is also speaking to the people that he's also speaking to his audience. Now that we have established his audience as well, you get the understanding why he says that happy are you who are the ones who are mourning. Because very often people who are poor or low in status, just like Job, they have no choice but to live with their pain. Right? There's no way out of this. There's nothing you could possibly distract yourself. Yeah? It is. I think that's also not. I think that's also not mistaken. At least in the sense that because there's nothing to distract yourself with, you have to face everything. You have to face everything that makes you mourn. And also mourning, like mourning in the Bible is associated with the concept of being exiled, being separated from something that should be yours, right? That's why when they say, and mourning is contrasted in this way with comfort, which comfort is also associated with the idea of re-inheritance. Like for example, Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet, right? Why does he weep? Why does he mourn? Because the people of God are soon to be dispossessed. And they are dispossessed in his lifetime, right? They are taken out of the land that was theirs. Mourning and exile. But what's the opposite half? Comfort my people, right? Jerusalem will be restored one day. That's what they're talking about here. So actually, even though they are talking about mourning and comfort, he's also talking about exile and return. He's talking about dispossession and inheritance. Like these ideas come together, actually. So in that sense, and of course, in many ways, the Jews themselves would have very much understood that these ideas come together. So the first beatitude is about the people who are poor, they will inherit, right? The poor will be the heirs. And he's saying now the exiled will come back. By the way, just a quick fun fact, even though Galilee is on the edge of the Jewish world now, its cosmopolitan by and large cosmopolitan nature actually means that it doesn't take part in the Jewish revolts that are largely centered around the region of Judea. So when the Jews are eventually expelled from, they're progressively expelled from their core lands, many of them actually escape to Galilee. And Galilee actually becomes the religious center of the Jews later in history. Well, that's kind of funny, isn't it? It's kind of funny how history works. In fact, they go to the city of Tiberias, which in Jesus' time, in Jesus' adult life, like when he's kind of like growing up to become an adult, Tiberias is actually being built as a sort of like Roman colony city out of the very freedmen, ex-convicts, and auxiliary soldiers that I was talking about earlier. It was being this city of refugees and city of outcasts was being built in Jesus' time, and it actually eventually becomes the Jewish center of religion after the various Jewish revolts, which is kind of funny. In total, there are 3, by the way. So one of them results in the destruction of the temple, and that's called the Great Jewish Revolt. And then the second one is actually one in which is a more general revolt called the Quietus War. It's named for the Roman general Quietus or Quietus, who suppresses the thing in Judea itself, even though it's actually more general. And the last one is known as the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which is absolutely disastrous. And after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, Tiberias, because they kind of have to get out of Judea altogether, Tiberias actually becomes the new Jewish religious center. Ha. Yes. Anyway, so this is kind of how you can interpret this thing. So like you said, like Uncle Shouting pointed out something pretty good, that you need to mourn that sin is something worth mourning as well. And so overall, when you put these things together, right, you get that happy are those who get that the world is something that we need to grieve over. The state of the world, your own grief is something you need to face. The grief of others is something that's worth understanding. It brings us together. And the world itself, like the state of, the unequal state of things, the way in which you have been, the structures that have led to his audience being effectively living in like a kind of social and spiritual exile. This state is something that's worth mourning. And acknowledging that puts you on the path towards the blessedness where God grants abundance. And Jesus is going to explain how do we live abundantly. Well, he will explain shortly. This is just the introduction, It's not going to be everything about his sermon, whether we like it or not. This is just the first part. This is the intro. The intro is like actually the short. Like I said in session 1, the intro and the conclusion are the short bits, right? The center is actually the longest. We aren't actually going to be able to finish all of it. I'm sorry, but hey. Yeah. So the rest of you can actually just read here. Okay, right? Understandable enough? Yeah. Okay. Whew. All right. The third one is, happy are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. This is, okay, so meek, nowadays we think about it as humble, as in like 谦虚. So that's not actually what they mean as well. If you think about it, right, if you think about how the Beatitudes have gone so far, this is probably not what it means, right? So what the word being used here is praus in Greek, and in Hebrew this would have been ani. So this means a person who is afflicted and oppressed. And so it's actually another word for the kinds of poverty that he was talking about earlier. It's a different sort of word for it. But inflection is more on 被欺压. Okay, so this whole beatitude is actually a link to, so it is a direct reference to Psalm 37. Early Psalm 37 verse 7 to 11, which reads like such. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the ani will inherit the land, and they will enjoy shalom, peace, and goodness, tov. So that's where Jesus is getting this line. He basically straight up just quotes this. He just straight up quotes Psalm 37:11. Just straight up insert it into the sermon. Okay, so it's worth noting that this is where we are coming from here. So where we are going from here is that actually the meek here are not those who are humble, as in 谦虚, but you have been humbled. You have been brought low. Yeah. And when he says brought low, so it also, like Psalm 37, Psalm 57, Psalm 57 especially, you have David characterizing himself as somebody who is humble. But specifically Psalm 57 is a psalm that David has written when he was fleeing from Saul. You know, when he flees from Saul, where was he originally? He was betrothed to Saul's daughter, right? He was basically like, he was effectively he was a hero, right? He's a hero. He was like a prince to be. And now he is a refugee. He's fleeing all the way from, he has to flee from Israel to its enemies, the Philistines. This is a long way to drop, right? So that's what David is characterizing himself as, like that. He says, I am the ani, I am, I have been brought low. And yes, it is associated with war and conquest, right? And I'm quite sure the Jews understand what that means too. Because this is where in any case, this is a complicated ass map, but you just need to know that this is the state of this map actually represents what is the last independent Jewish state before the current one. So this is called the Hasmonean dynasty, and depending on how you argue it, it lasts maybe, its independence is questionable, but if you count it as being nominally independent, it lasts maybe like anywhere from 100 to like 60 odd years. See how you want to argue autonomy, huh? It has been so for them. So we think about the 300. So we think about the 300 years, right? We talk about 300 years between something like Malachi and something like Matthew, right? But for the Jews, it actually, depending on how you define it, it has been much longer than that since they were free to inherit their own land. For around 700 years, they have been dispossessed, and they have gained a small measure of autonomy briefly before Jesus' time, for just a very short period of time. Maybe like, if you're unkind, if you're very nice, it's like 15 to 20% of the time since Babylon or since like Assyria. if you don't want to be very nice, 10%. You imagine 10% of the last 700 years you spend not under somebody else's jackboot. That sucks. Like that's a really crappy feeling to have. It's a bad way to live. And Jesus says, happy are those who have been brought low. It's like, I know you mean me, but what do you mean? Right? And Jesus says that those who have been brought low will inherit the land. He quotes again Psalm 37. This is actually in many ways like a message of, I guess, so Jesus is saying that my message is a message of restoration. My message is a message of hope. So in that sense, Jesus is being positioned in the book of Matthew as the Messiah. Yes, that's that's good recognition. Exactly. So that's why I was saying in session 1, right? That you have to see how the book of Matthew is trying to position Jesus as the Messiah. And this is kind of, yeah? Yes. Yes. Woo! Yeah. Yeah. I don't think Jesus has the exact same view of submissive as we do. Like I think that word also has a bit of baggage that Jesus is definitely not bringing on board here. I think Jesus does want an active process, but it is not a process based on aggression. Like aggression and oppression are the powers of the world as far as Jesus is concerned. Jesus wants people to be active, but not aggressive. Engage with systems of power, but not by using oppression. Like we will see this further. I think that's a great point out, and we are actually going to engage with that a bit more with like the later Beatitudes when Jesus starts talking about like. So this is, you can consider these first three Beatitudes to be Jesus' like introduction, like the sales, like kind of like you wanna be a bit secular about it. It is the sales pitch. It's who am I here? Who are we here for? What are we gonna do? And then after that, he gives more details about what the ethic is. When you go like hunger and thirst for righteousness, like these are, we start getting into the actions he would like people to be taking. Yes, thanks, Hui Hui. Yeah, that's, yeah? Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. 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 Jesus has a very specific view of what submissiveness is supposed to mean here. Yeah, so we will definitely get more into that as we go on, because Jesus will talk about like who are we supposed to emulate, like whose example in the mindset, in like the memory of the Jews he is speaking to, like whose example are they to emulate? Who are they going to? Who went before so that we can do it now? Like, who do we look towards? Jesus will give examples later. Yay! So, this is kind of like the interpretation. Happy are the unimportant, the downtrodden, because this whole section is about talking about people who basically this whole like three-parter is talking about people who are lowly. And actually you will find that quite a lot of Christian writing later, it actually picks up on this concept of like being inheritors, right? Like to all who receive him and who have believed in his name, they gave the right to be the children of God. Like these are the ideas of like you become inheritors, you become heirs. Like this, these are just like these are all these ideas that will then be picked up later, and they will be further expounded on. Like, what does that mean? What should we do? Things have changed between the time Jesus was alive and now. What now? Right? Based on that identity as inheritors. Like, this is something that Christians will come to hold on to a great deal. Yes. So, this is our conclusion. So in a world where it is too easy to ignore the powerless, Christ came first to those who were powerless and who had been crushed by the unjust structures of the world they lived in. So Jesus is telling, so in many ways, how we can apply it is we empathize with these people. We empathize and feel, I think that's why the second part is necessary. Live in your mourning, like understand pain. That's kind of what so in many ways that we are called to do as well. Yeah, and that when people feel valued and unimportant, Jesus' example, like Jesus came to the people who were devalued and unimportant, regarded as unimportant, right? Jesus is on the side of the oppressed. Jesus is on the side of the outcast. Jesus is on the side of the humble. And as followers of Jesus, we should emulate Jesus' example. That's who we should be with. That's who we should have that same spirit for. Right. Yes, we are done. Okay. I knew the first one was going to be the trickiest. So that's fine. The next two are not as tricky. Oh my god, salt and light. It's gonna be a pain in the ass. Okay. For today. So in a couple of weeks, we are going to go over the next 3 Beatitudes in which Jesus expounds more on like the kingdom ethic. Like what should people who want to be part of the kingdom of heaven do? Right. Like what sort of characteristics should they have? What sort of attitude should they have? So that's where we're going to continue, and in February. We'll see you then. Yes. Anyway, there's going to be a short quiz if you all have time for that. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you guys are going to need to shift to the front because I really could not. Maybe it's just a free account problem, but I could not enlarge the font, so you all are just going to have to shift in front. I'm sorry. Wow, so pro. 好快哦。Wait, is that not? No, no, it should be. No, I'm saying the timing. The time should be longer. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, the duration of this one is a bit short. Anyway, this is definitely one of the. Yeah, so this is definitely one of the trickier ones. So number A is actually number A was definitely a trick answer. So A was a trick answer to some extent because the third beatitude references Psalms 37 directly, and it also has associations with Psalm 57, but definitely not 47. Okay, so yeah, I'm glad everybody got it. So it does address the Roman occupation of Judea, but not mainly that. Yeah, it does address it though. It's not that it's not about that. It's just not the only or main thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very sorry about that. It's a bit. Okay, here we go. I did mention all of them. I mentioned all of them, actually. Okay. So this one's interesting. Okay, I did mention three of them. So the Great Jewish Revolt is the one that takes place in the. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So the Maccabean Revolt specifically precedes Jesus' time. So the Maccabean Revolt is actually against the Greeks, who were the Greeks were actually, at least this particular king is known as I believe it's our Epiphanes. So this king Epiphanes was a lot less tolerant than honestly most Greek and Roman kings were about Jewish religion. They were mostly more tolerant than that, but this particular king tried to have sacrifices to other gods done at the Jewish temple, and that caused the revolt. Yeah. So the other three wars, they actually fought against the Romans, and trust me, they lost all three horrendously. The most successful one was the Great Jewish Revolt, which happened in the AD 60s. It lasted quite a while and actually cost the Romans a lot of legions. But Rome used to be the kind of people who are like, we lose 2 legions, we'll just build 4 more and come after you. So the Jews didn't really get that, so they got the destroy 3 legions and get 6 for free. That did not go well for them. Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, so in truth, okay, I have to say that in truth, the whole concept of like a big theme in the entire a theme of the sermon, one of the themes of Sermon on the Mount is definitely about he is definitely comparing the idea of entering the kingdom of heaven to the concept of returning to something. That's not totally wrong. But I did explicitly say that the second beatitude is the one that makes the link between mourning and comfort. Mourning is associated with exile, and comfort is associated with return. So that's actually the one that most has that theme. Okay, next. Okay. Okay, so it's yeah. So okay, so pneuma. Okay, so like I explained earlier, pneuma is in terms of like in terms of the elements of the world associated with wind and air, and in terms of like associated with spirit and with life. So water and spirit was I was just being mean, and I just wrote something that actually is in the Bible but not about this. This is actually about being born again. Be born again by water and spirit. Sorry. Still got. Oh yeah, Joel said. Okay, so yeah, so actually I did quote these verses that to all who receive and believe in His name give right to be the children of God, and I also quoted like the idea that becoming a chosen people, becoming like the idea that you have a chosen people, you have come to inherit the kingdom of God. Like these are things that actually I actually mentioned that the works of the disciples and the letters of the disciples actually all pick up on this a lot. Yeah. Okay, next. Wow, really? Okay, so okay, so just as I heard some people saying this earlier, and you are correct. Galilee actually shares a border with Samaria, not with Judea. Galilee is actually even further away. Yeah. Wait, next. Wow. Okay. I'm trolling. Yo. Yo. Okay. I. Okay. Here's. Okay. Yeah. So specifically, the theme we were talking about was okay. Okay. I will admit that I probably should have been clearer that what I was trying to ask here was about a theme that was addressed in our session earlier, which is actually mourning and comfort. It is true that there is a verse that goes, "He has turned my mourning into dancing," and that's actually somewhat related. I have to say that they are not unrelated. But fortunately, Job doesn't dance. Job just curses the day he was born and says, "Let there be darkness. Let there be darkness on the day that I was born." Yeah, Job doesn't really. Unfortunately, Job's not that happy. Okay, so the theme of Job, there's no dancing in Job, but Job does get a restored ending towards the end. This is not wrong. Yeah. We don't get to the part where he dances. This okay. Yeah, 我们这个李家太强了。OK， 来，李家很强。Nope. Oh yes, Matthew. Okay. Yes, Ruth. Do you want to claim the other one for your dad? Yes. Yeah, take it for your dad. Woo! All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for paying attention. Sorry, did I mute it? Is that my head? What? Sorry. Which one? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Honestly, thanks for all the questions as well. I think that really helped for me to. You all definitely helped me clarify like what else we need to be talking about and what we need to be focusing on. Because yeah, I think I was there. I definitely came into this session with some concerns about how we are going to be approaching this. So thanks for asking the questions and helping clarify for me what your concerns are as well regarding like what's the difference, like how much of a gap do we need to bridge between our time and GS's time. So thanks a lot for the questions. That really helped. Yeah. Anyway, I will see you all now. I'll be taking a break until February. I'll see you all then, and then we'll see you all for session 3. Yes, thank you all very much for being here. See you all next time.